Carol is one of the most viscerally frustrating protagonists I've watched in recent history. And it's not just because she's flawed, but it's also because she seems static in the face of overwhelming evidence. She is not a character whose arc is about learning, more so, it's about resistance to learning. I also want to say that this is in no way an attack on the actress. The actress is amazing, she's doing a phenomenal job, but this is more of an attack on the character of Carol. I also should say that from the beginning of the show, Carol is given every possible justification for immense fear. Episode 1 puts her in a scenario that would psychologically devastate almost anyone. I watched this episode and I said, wow, that is one of the scariest first episodes I've ever watched and one of the scariest scenarios I've ever seen. The collapse of ordinary reality, mass panic, and the death of her wife during an incomprehensible event, her terror is not only understandable, but it is earned. In the first episode, Carol read to me as very human, raw, terrified, grasping for meaning, and she reacts the way many people would when confronted with something that looks indistinguishable from like an actual horror film. But I believe throughout the next couple of episodes, it removes her justification almost immediately. Once communication is established, once the hive speaks, once it demonstrates any form of coherence, restraint, whatever, the story stops being about survival and more about choice. And this is where, to me, Carol's character collapsed. Not because she's scared, but because she refuses to let fear evolve into understanding. Carol frames her opposition to the hive mind as a principled resistance. She values what's lost, the value of autonomy and individuality. But time and time again, she never responds to what has been gained. When asked about the real harms that have been prevented, like murders, racism, xenophobia, she dismisses them because they do not register to her as losses personally. Her consistent question is never, is humanity better, but am I diminished? This is a defining feature of her moral failure to me. She measures the world only by her own discomfort. Now, what I'm not trying to say is that the hive is right or wrong with these things. I'm talking about the fact that she never even brings them up as ideas of things that are beneficial. This shows the most in her first interactions with the other survivors. And it kind of shows a lot about her character too. She leads them. She lords authority over them. She bosses around grieving people. She interrupts them. She invalidates their different shapes of grief. And she uses vocal dominance over them instead of any semblance of a moral argument. Leadership in a crisis situation like this would require listening, compromise, and accountability, traits that almost all the other survivors show, but Carol doesn't. Carol wants to be in a theatrical command. She wants control. She wants to save the world. This is a hero complex. And especially for those who still have family within the hive, Carol's lack of empathy is like a direct insult to their love and loss. This is not the only character flaw that she has. She's also a very wasteful and entitled person. She insists on having her own personal private grocery store so that all that extra food can go to waste because there's no way she can shop it herself. All because she wants the feeling of normalcy by shopping at a grocery store. She has them turn on all the lights in her city for some reason, for some comfort, I guess, instead of just participating in the energy preserving measures that the community was already using to just turn the lights on when she gets there. Joe even jokes about this when talking about the fact that she donates to the Sierra Club to point out her hypocrisy with her not being environmentally conscious. And the worst thing about her is that we know that this wasn't caused by the hive. She was a bad person the entire time. This is someone who we know was drinking and driving because she has a breathalyzer in her car. So that already shows that she doesn't care about other people. She has absolutely no gratefulness to the people that have made her rich and be able to live a comfortable life and take trips with her wife. And even when on trips with her wife, she is ungrateful. She doesn't want to be there. She doesn't want to do all this extra stuff. A lot of people say that it's good to have character flaws, and of course it is. But character flaws are only beneficial when there's also things you're supposed to like about a character. And she doesn't have any of that. She's not a very kind person. She doesn't have a lot of charisma. She's not very intelligent. So what am I rooting for her for? What reason do I have to root for her and be on her side? Because I'm not going to root for her just because she's human. I think one of the most damning aspects of her characterization is her refusal to confront her own role in her wife's death. While the hive is the easy target, we know that the only reason her wife died is because she fell backwards and hit her head on the pavement. This only happened because Carol left her partner during a moment of crisis to go see what happened with a fender bender. I think Carol realizes the role she had in her partner's death, and rather than sitting in that guilt, Carol externalizes it. She needs the hive to be evil, because if they aren't, then she's left alone with herself. She needs them to be the one that killed her wife. This is why she's willing to drug the hive, to be reckless and cause 11 million people to die. Which is another thing I want to talk about with Carol. Carol learns that her act of being angry at the hive cost 11 million people their lives, and not even 30 minutes later, she does it again. And then has the nerve at the end of the episode to be like, "Can you fix me?" Like she has no agency on her own to not do things like this, to not have outbreaks. This is why I can't see Carol as a tragic hero. Her actions and her attitude that accompanies them push her past like ambiguity and more into like active malice. This contrasts with a character like Menusos because while even he is against the hive, at least he stands on a principle and doesn't like continuously work with them. She condemns the hive while repeatedly relying on them. She denounces their structure while exploiting their mercy, and she rejects their ethics while benefiting from the peace that they created. And this is why she's so much more unbearable, because she has no principles she's willing to suffer for, and her resistance demands sacrifice from everyone but herself. In episode 6, we learn that all of the other survivors meet except for her. They say to her this is because she's a distraction. And this is true. Anytime Carol is in a situation, she's always centering herself. I don't even think she realizes how selfish she is. And that's why she cries in the bathroom, because she's almost coming to the realization that, wow, I'm a terrible person. The fact that there's only 12 people left on the planet and 10 of them don't even want to be around me. But does she learn anything from this? No. She just goes back to being herself. No growth at all in her character. She'd rather make fun of the woman's kid who knows gynecological procedures, because that's easier for her than extending any hand of empathy because she doesn't have it. And I believe there's a clear social pattern here. At the end of episode 1, when Carol sees that there's still a person on TV that's an American, she says, "God bless America." I think that sums up her character a lot. Carol is American individualism. She has the tendency to avoid dialogue, to insist on unilateral moral ownership, and to lag behind everyone else in understanding and judgment. Where the other survivors deliberate and act collectively, she's isolated. She demands and then mistakes loneliness for like moral clarity, that she's the one in the right and everyone else is wrong. Carol is what you get when trauma meets entitlement, when grief meets narcissism, and when fear refuses to mature into wisdom.